He said, we can't get through. You're blocking everything because you're letting the past creep up on you again. You're letting everything mount up on your shoulders. He said, you're not absorbing what's being told in meetings. He says, I can tell. He says, you need to let go more. And it wasn't until I, listened to that and just decided not to worry so much about what everybody thinks of me and about what my family thinks and my friends and all the damage I've done. Concentrate on getting better. Let go.
That was Bob Apple, and this is the SHAIR Podcast.
It's time for the SHAIR Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host,
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the SHAIR Podcast. And today we have Robert Apple joining us on the show. And Robert is a blogger. He is the founder of Sober Apple Blog. And today he shares his story with us. Bob, at the age of 55 years old, became addicted to alcohol and prescription drugs. His life quickly began to unravel and was forced to retire from his job at UPS after 27 years as a driver. He became an absolute mess and lost everything, his family, his friends, and in no time at all was trying to drink himself to death. Bob finally agreed to go to rehab, where he was introduced to sober living homes for the first time, where he ended up spending over 2 years in a sober living home and was the absolute best decision he ever made in his life. Join us now as Bob takes us through his battle through drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in his life, when he hit rock bottom, and then finally his journey into recovery and sober living up until today. So let's dive into Bob's story. But first, if you have not yet rated and reviewed the SHAIR Podcast, please, one of the best ways to help support the show is to go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and a review, and that helps catapult us up the ratings on iTunes, which will make it easier for more and more people to find the SHAIR Podcast. Now, in the past, many of you have asked, how can I help support the show? Well, I'm going to keep it simple for you. The first way is by donating via PayPal or Bitcoin. And of course, I want to thank all of our listeners who have been generously donating every month to the SHAIR Podcast. Make no mistake about it, you guys are making a huge difference. But again, we can always use more, and now you can even send us donations using Bitcoin. So if you go to the website, www.theshairpodcast.com, on the top right corner, there's a donate button. Click on that button, and it'll take you to the page where you can donate either by PayPal or by Bitcoin. On a weekly basis, I have over 5,000 listeners every week who listen to the SHAIR Podcast. So if 100 of you guys would send me $5 a month or more, there are a few listeners that are sending $10, $20, and even $50 every month, that would completely support the show from beginning to end. So for those of you who have the wherewithal to send me $5, either by PayPal or by Bitcoin, then by all means, please feel free to donate now. We could really use the support. Also, when you're purchasing stuff on Amazon, there are those of you that are still clicking on the Amazon link on the SHAIR Podcast website before doing their purchases on Amazon. But again, there are thousands of you listening. If each and every one of you could just remember to go to the SHAIR website, click on the Amazon button before you do your shopping, that is also going to make a tremendous difference for us financially. So I haven't been one to emphasize it in the past, right? But now we've got a solid listener base. I know you guys love the show. I know you guys get a lot out of it. There are those of you, just like in the meetings, that are newcomers. The money's tight. Keep listening. The show will always be for free. The SHAIR Podcast private accountability group will always be for free. But for those of you who can, kick in a couple of bucks. Help us out here. And not to forget the SHAIR Podcast private accountability group. Again, it's growing like crazy. Guys, go to the SHAIR Podcast, www.theshairpodcast. Click on the button that says join the Facebook private group. For those of you that are in the private accountability group, you know how vital and important that has become. There's over 1,500 members in there. If you don't want to go to meetings, if you have problems connecting with people, if you need something more than just the podcasts and are not ready to cross over into meetings or some other structured program, then the private accountability group is perfect for you. Jump in there, make comments, ask questions, or just read the posts. There are so many people out there that have the same questions that you have. All you have to do is just read those and then read all the follow-up answers and responses that come. And make sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter so you know every single time a brand new episode is launched. And of course, if you have any questions, just email me, at theshairpodcast.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So now a quick message from our sponsors, and then on to the show. Would you like to join a free, anonymous online group that offers a daily topic email with popular recovery resources, accompanied by a secret Facebook group for discussion? Then go to dailyaaemails.com for more information about Transitions Daily. And don't forget to share dailyaaemails.com with friends, in meetings, and with sponsees in recovery. Sober Nation is the largest online recovery community and treatment resource center. They provide treatment resources to those struggling with addiction, as well as to the family members who are caught in the crossfire. On top of that, Sober Nation is a huge community of good people who share their experience with each other. They have informative content, recovery and addiction news, as well as an entire clothing line which helps expand the culture of recovery. They can easily be found at www.sobernation.com. Sober Nation is putting recovery on the map. Hey, Robert, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, O, for having me.
I'm excited to have you on the show today. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so folks, today we have Robert Apple joining us on the SHAIR Podcast, and Robert was a sober living home manager for 2 years and is a huge proponent of the sober living concept. So let's dive right in. So first, Robert, take us into your normal daily routine, including recovery.
Okay. Well, I'm really involved with, I have a site where I blog. So I do a lot of blogging, a lot of writing, also finishing up a book that I've written. I don't have many hobbies these days because a lot of my writing and my efforts go towards the internet and trying to help people on the internet. But I do exercise a lot. I make it a point to get to the gym. If I can't get to the gym every day, it's every other day. I lift weights. Exercise is so important in recovery. I learned that early on, and it helped tremendously. So normally, I get up and, sometimes I'll get on, I'll Skype with people. I get phone calls a lot from my people that I used to live with in the sober living homes. It's kind of a community. I spent a lot of time with that. I spent a lot of time reaching out to people on sites like my sponsors. I'll spend some time on there when I get a chance, and you get to chat with people. That's about it. I'm just knee deep in it.
So you do a lot of online meetings?
Yeah. I like those.
Do you have like a regular home group that you attend? Do you sponsor guys? Do you have a sponsor? I mean, I just asked this just to get a roundabout idea of like how you work your program.
Yeah, I still have a sponsor. I don't contact them as much as I used to. But when I do, when I need to, I'll ring them. I did sponsor some people, and I had one sponsee that we finally finished up, and he moved on. And so now I try and focus on what I can do on the internet and people that call me. I get calls. Probably every week I get a call from somebody that knows somebody that, can you talk to this person? And I love that.
Absolutely. The power of carrying the message.
Yes. And I'll hit a meeting once in a while. I actually moved here from the Bay Area, so I've only been down here about 7 months. So went to some meetings, but it's not something I do religiously anymore. Like I used to go, when I first got out of recovery, I was going sometimes twice a day. I just am so involved in so many other ways that it just takes up so much of my time, and I just feel immersed in it anyway. I'll sit down and read the big book once in a while before I go to bed just to keep refreshed in that.
That's good. Excellent. So on that note, how much clean time do you have, and when is your anniversary date?
Anniversary date is January 28th, 2014. So I just celebrated that a little while ago, and it's been 3 years.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And how do you maintain that spiritual condition, that conscious contact with your higher power on a daily basis?
I'm glad you asked that. Generally it's in the morning and sometimes at night before I go to bed. I get up every day and I sit there at the foot of the bed, and I remember asking for help from God, and it all worked out. Everything that he guided me to has kept me sober for 3 years. I've been able to help people. I've been able to help myself. And so I just sit at the foot of my bed every morning. I just take a pause and meditate, speak a little bit to God, and then kind of get up and get on with the day.
Wonderful, wonderful. So still applying a lot of the foundation of early sobriety, which is like when I remember my sponsor telling me the same thing. Get up every morning and pray, ask for guidance, ask for help, keep me clean.
Yeah.
Another day. And then at night, just being grateful, for another day clean, and it's just that you're doing an inventory too at the same time.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a beautiful way to open and a beautiful way to close the day.
Yeah.
No question about it. So tell us a little bit about the sober living. I know you wanted to, speak a little bit about, what it was like as a sober living home manager.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about that time in your life.
Well, what led up to it is in one calendar year, I was in 3 different rehabs. And, obviously it wasn't working for me. And every time I would get out of rehab, I would go back home and just replicate the same problems. And the last time I was getting out of the last rehab, and I swore I was not going to go back to another rehab. And they said, you know what, you shouldn't go home. You should go to a sober home. I didn't even know what one it was. I didn't know what they were talking about. And I said, no, I've got a home to go to. I'm going home. And they said, no, you really? And so it took about 3 weeks for them to convince me. And finally I said, you know what? I kind of agree with all this. I said, I know what I did last time, and I know, how that didn't work out for me. So that's how I got introduced into sober living homes. So when I got out of the rehab, I rented a car and drove straight to the sober living home, and walked in, checked in. I basically, luckily I had a really great counselor at the rehab I was in, and she set the whole thing up for me. And I walked in and I said, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to like this. This is just what I thought. I'm with a bunch of strangers, and this can't be good for me. This is not going to be good. Everybody greeted me. Everybody walked up to me and was so nice to me. And, hey, I'm glad you're here. What's your name? Shake your hand. Showed you around the place. And so I stayed. Just like anything else, just like our addict minds, my first thing was, plotting a way to get out of here and say to everyone, see, I went and everything's fine now. And I just, it didn't turn out that way. I liked it. I felt comfortable. I felt safe. I had people to talk to where I didn't before. As an alcoholic, you isolate. So
right. Absolutely.
It was just perfect. It was the perfect environment, and I enjoyed it. And so I stayed about 6 months, and then they asked me to be the assistant manager. Well, I was, about that time. And shortly thereafter, they said, we'd like you to be the manager. And I stayed another 2 years because I loved managing the house.
So you've only recently moved out of the house.
Yeah, it's only been, I moved straight out of the house, and I came to Santa Maria, where I reside now. My mother was ill, Alzheimer's, and she actually passed away when I got down here a couple of months later. But
wow.
Yeah. And so I probably would have stayed at the house longer. But, family calls, and I had to come down. And
what is it about that environment that you can tell us about that's, so impactful, necessary?
Yeah.
There's so many words I can use because you're in a completely safe environment. Most people go into rehab, and the minute they get out, they just want to pick up their life where they left behind it, which was usually garbage anyway.
Yeah.
And they don't know which way to go, so in many cases, they end up going back out.
Yeah.
So tell us about, why you feel it's so important that people bridge their new life with an opportunity like going to a halfway house or a sober living environment.
Yeah, I've got a great answer for that, too. Here's the thing. When you walk into a sober living home, and if you've committed yourself to give it a try and make it happen, and even if you aren't, like I did, you're going to find that it's what it is. It's a blank slate. You don't know anybody in the house. You're removed from in my case, it was across, other than the Bay Area, it was another city that I lived in. It was a whole new environment, and there wasn't anything that I was attached to. I was untethered from everything, any bad influence. it was just a blank canvas, and it was so refreshing to just have a bunch of people. All my wreckage and all the things that I needed to clean up, later, were removed. They weren't staring me in the face. There wasn't anything, and I was able to just rebuild myself there and not worry. There was no familiar faces knocking on the door. There was nobody calling me on the phone. There was no other outside influences that would make me anxious. I was just sequestered away in this nice little environment that everyone else was having the same problems. And there was just comfort in everything on being there.
I would say that it's very similar, that same feeling when you first discover the rooms as well.
Yes.
It's also a blank slate because you don't know anybody.
Yep.
It's a place where you can feel 100% safe, even though at first you probably don't. But after you've been there a while, you realize that everybody else is just as the same as you are, going through the same things or have gone through many of the same things you have. And there's that ease and comfort that comes with being in an environment with people that know what you're going through, and that you can talk about these things without feeling like you're going to be exposed in a negative way.
Exactly. That is so true. That's exactly what happens. You can sit in the backyard. You can sit and watch television with someone. You can just have a private you're with someone who understands. You're not talking to friends who don't have those problems, or your family members, and it's that same antagonistic thing that comes about. They don't understand why they're asking you those questions. You're talking to someone that actually knows exactly what you're going through and they're going through, and you can relate to them. And you can finally just relax. When you talk to them, you're relaxed. When you're talking to others who've tried to help you and they're a little angry at you, there's always this pensive, dialogue that goes back and forth. And here, it was just, you just, all of a sudden you blossom as a person again. You're not pretending to be something. You're not looking at people that you've lied to so many times. There's no connection there anymore. It's kind of broken. It can come back once you've, stepped away and you've blossomed and you've become that person that's not a liar, wouldn't, basically lying. We all lie to everybody that's, no, I'm not drinking. No, I'm not doing any drugs. No, I'm not. No, you don't understand. I'm fine now. All those lies we've told and we've disappointed people there. It's just, we get to talk about how are we going to fix these things? What's your sponsor doing? What's he telling you? You're conversing about those things. You all go to meetings together a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Over here in Costa Rica, we have a couple of those, and you see a lot of camaraderie build up from within rehab centers and the halfway homes. They stick together, and it's usually that, getting rights to meetings, getting rights after the meetings, and then there's the meetings after the meetings. Especially like you say, they're in the home together, so they can discuss, hey, something interesting happened in the meeting last night. And for those of us that aren't in a sober living environment, may not have that same opportunity at home.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. And, we used to, there's so many people that come to a sober living home that have lost their licenses, lost their jobs, lost a lot of things. And those of us that had cars, we could take them places. We could take them to the grocery store. So it's not just that you have a room and that you're away, you also have opportunities that you wouldn't have before. And someone to help you, mentor you, someone that's been there a little longer can turn around and mentor you and help you through the process of acclimating to the home. If you're having problems with your steps, they may be farther up than you, and they can help you. There's just you're not going to find that by yourself. If you don't live in a sober living home and you're out on your own devices, should I call my sponsor today? Should I bother going to this meeting? Here, you've got people saying, hey, I'm going to a meeting. Who wants to go? And boom, so you do make those meetings. You do your sponsor work. You do extra work. You do, during the house meetings, I'd say to people, okay, you're going to meetings now. You've been going to meetings for how long now? What about some secretary work? How about chairing? I secretary 2 meetings, and I would bring in my some of the people that were in my house for a while, and I would have them chair the meeting to get them exposure for that. And you can't find a better environment that's going to provide you with that much opportunities to stay on track And it was self-policing too. If we saw people sliding off, we'd talk to them. Hey, you're not going to meetings. You're not doing this. Are you serious? You need some help. You're not going to find that out there if you're by yourself.
Right.
If you move to your parents, or you move back to your wife. You make the calls, you make the shots, you call the shots. And if you're not calling them right, maybe not so good.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about how old you were the first time you drank or used drugs, and more importantly, how they made you feel.
Yeah, I have a funny story, a different story to tell. So it's like in two parts. I started drinking and using marijuana when I was 15, and then I turned into pretty much by the time I was a junior in high school, I was the party guy of my group. I was the kind of guy that, when we would all go out drinking, it seems like I always wanted to drink too much. And the others had more sense. And then I was the guy, by the time I was a senior in high school and just after high school, I was a guy knocking on people's doors in the middle of the week. Come on, let's go out and have a beer. Let's go, I got 2 6-packs. And, they're like, I'm busy. Or it's a school night. What's wrong with you?
You were that guy.
I was that guy. Yeah, I was that guy. And so anyway, definitely I was aimless. Everybody else was going off to college, and nothing was happening in my life because literally I was drinking probably every chance I got at night. I did hold down a job sometimes. And anyway, so the story kind of ended that I stopped drinking because I got married, and
Gotcha.
I met a woman, and we got married and had a baby right away. And so I really didn't drink for a while, like for quite some time. And alcohol is definitely my drug of choice. And what happened is, and this is why this story is so unique, and when I tell it at meetings and that I've been to, everybody scratches their head. I literally went about 30 years of my life going from drinking every night and really on the precipice of becoming a full-blown alcoholic to stopping. And later in life, around when I was in my 50s, I started drinking again. And what I knew probably would have happened to me earlier in life had I kept going happened to me later in life. And I became a full-blown raging alcoholic in my 50s.
Okay, all right. Well, let me pause you there because I haven't asked. I have a format. So this is where I usually say, okay, well, a little before that. All right. So now that you're warmed up, it's time for me to turn the show over to you, Robert. It's time for you to share your story, the battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and then finally your journey into recovery up until today. So, Robert, you can start right there about where you left off. I guess it was 30 years into your marriage?
Yeah.
So you managed to stay sober for 30 years?
I did. I know that sounds weird, and nobody has a story like mine, but yeah, that's absolutely true.
That is wild. Okay, so go ahead.
So anyway, actually I was divorced. I did get divorced, and so I was single at the time. And I had a great full-time job working at UPS, and this is going to sound so silly, but it's true. And, they tell you to tell the truth, and I believe that. I'm sitting around, and I was watching the show Mad Men, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna build a bar in my house. So I built a bar, really nice one, and I started having cocktails at night. And the old alcoholic ways started to creep into my life, and 5 years of drinking that way caught up to all of a sudden, it wasn't drinking at night. It was drinking in the morning before work. It was, and at the very end, before I had to, literally quit my job, I had to retire early because my drinking problem was so bad. I'd have the shakes in the morning. I'd come home at night and I would drink, all through, into the night, and it just went on for 2 years, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I mean, I was gone, and there's clearly there was no doubt in my mind I was a total alcoholic, even though I didn't want to admit it.
Right.
So I did the right thing. I checked into, my daughter came and said, look, if you don't go to a rehab, I'm not going to speak to you anymore. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And but at the end of my last year of drinking, my bosses had gotten wind of, what was happening to me. And I just had to summarily just, retire one day. I didn't want to retire, but I had to. I couldn't work any further. I couldn't step one further the way I was going and maintain a job. There was no way. And when I retired, I started drinking really heavily for a year. And my daughter came to me and said, go to a rehab. So I went to a rehab, and I got out, and I thought I was, I thought, you know what? I don't like anything about AA. I don't like anything about those people. I'm not drinking anymore. I went through their rehab, and I'm fine. I went to meetings, and I didn't like any of it, and all of it was ego. Anyway. So 2 months after I'd gotten out of my first rehab, I'm walking near the shopping center by my house, and I looked inside the liquor store, and I said, I'm going to go in and buy a bottle. I'm going to go home, have a couple of shots tonight, call it a night, and prove to myself that I'm not an alcoholic. And that's the last of that story. I remember that plan. And 2 months later, I knew my daughter. I couldn't tell her anything. That just wasn't going to happen. So I checked myself into another rehab, and I got out. I had all the best intentions in the world, and I was all by myself. There was nobody to monitor me, and I had plenty of money, and it's not like I couldn't afford to, drink and not, have a living, live in a house and live, I wasn't going to be homeless or anything if I lost a job. I mean, I'd retired, and so it was kind of the worst case scenario for me, and started drinking again. And of course, this relapse was even worse, and I went all the way to the point, where I would only get up. The last 2 months of drinking that year, I could only get out of bed and stagger to the liquor store and get a bottle and stagger home. It was about a 10-minute walk. And the last month of that, I just collapsed I would come in the sliding glass door into my bedroom, collapse on the bed with the bottle in my hand. And I'd become so weak the last time I collapsed on the bed and staggered back from that liquor store. I said to myself, well, this is it. I can't walk anymore. There's no way I can get to the liquor store anymore. It's a good thing I bought 2 bottles, because hopefully this just finishes me off, and that'll be the end of it. I was so depressed and so despondent that I could not stop drinking. I just couldn't take it anymore. And so lo and behold, God sent somebody, an old friend who hadn't seen me in a long time, came into my house through the sliding glass door that I left open, and saw me, called my daughter, and my daughter came and got me and took me to the hospital. And from the hospital, we went to the rehab. She took me straight to a rehab. The rehab would not accept me because I was so ill. I hadn't eaten, and I was just in bad shape. They took me back to the hospital for 3 more days. And then I got into my last rehab, and I said to myself, well, I'm sort of thankful. I am thankful I'm alive, but I still, I just didn't know what would happen to me at that point.
Right.
It was really rough. I was thinking, I knew I had a chronic alcohol problem. I wasn't giving AA a chance. I wasn't listening to anybody. And, but I sat and listened, and I participated in that last rehab way more than I had before. And and I started to accept that, there's got to, if I'm going to live, if I choose to live, I'm going to have to change my ways. And I think that's why when we presented the sober living home, I said, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it.
Wow, man. That is, the thing is that as you start to get closer and closer to the end, I can picture it. I can picture you walking to the liquor store and, the shambles that you must be in, and what you've got to smell like and what you've got to look like, and
my God! I am so glad you brought that up. It was so embarrassing to go in there. The last time when I staggered in, I must have smelled so badly because there was a line there, and it was absolutely. I could see the looks on their faces like, this guy smells awful. And I could barely stagger back to my house. But it's so funny that you said that, because I didn't bring it. It's in my head, but I didn't think of it at the time. That's exactly how it was.
Oh, I'm picturing it. That incomprehensible demoralization, that pit of despair, that that feeling of, I just want to die. Like, if I could just drink myself to death,
absolutely,
I'm going to do it. Right. Did you ever see that movie, Leaving Las Vegas?
Absolutely. Yep.
I started getting flashbacks of that movie as you were talking, because it just felt like somebody who was trying to drink themselves to death.
I was. I had lost all my friends. Everybody had turned their backs on me. Nobody wanted to talk to me anymore. I had lied to everybody. And lied to my work. I had to leave, in complete shame after a 27-year career. I had to just walk out, no cake, no, celebration like everybody else got. I had to just slither out the back door by calling, HR and saying, I'm retired. I'll come in and sign my paperwork. It was humiliating. It was terrible. I didn't want to go on. I just didn't. And I'd bought 2 bottles, and that was my plan. I was, one day I woke up just before my friend had arrived, and I looked out the window and I said, good God, I woke up again. I said, and I drank some more, and I was thinking, well, hopefully tomorrow it's not raining. So when they come find me, at least they'll take me out and it won't be raining, because it had been raining, it was in January. Yeah. That's how bad it got.
It's like, like I said, I was picturing it. So then, you retire from there after 27 years. How old were you when you retired?
60.
Okay. All right. So you just barely, you got there right at the 60 mark. My sponsor says, you slid in greasier than a gas station mop. You know what I mean? Now, in this whole story, when did your wife leave you? Because you didn't say when she left you, but I know she left you.
Yeah, we divorced. We had divorced years earlier. So luckily she wasn't affected, and she wasn't. So I had been single for quite some time. So luckily, I didn't have a spouse that was. Yeah, that would have had to seen all that. It would have been horrifying. I'm actually thankful for that. My daughter, on the other hand, had to see all of it, and it was just heartbreaking.
So your wife was already gone.
Wife was already gone, yeah. She would have been gone. Anybody would have been gone, that.
Right. And your daughter, she couldn't take anymore. She threatened you multiple times to get into rehab, or she would disconnect from you.
Yeah, well, she's gone to Al-Anon, so she was prepared. She knew how to help.
That it's so important, important. That's another very important key part of this interview as well, is that family members. Because I've had emails where people send me and they go, I don't know what to do with my sister. She's out of control. What can I do? And I said, the best thing you can do is get to an Al-Anon meeting or a CODA meeting or an Ar-Anon meeting, where you can be with other family members that are coping with this sort of a dilemma.
Yeah.
And you need to be strong on your own, and you need to understand what they're going through so you can understand what you're going through. But for you to try and attempt to save them, no one that is not willing to be saved can be.
No.
It is really a divine intervention that happened to me. You have to have that moment of clarity that comes into your life, or it's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I write blogs about that as well. All we have is communication. And once you communicate to someone all that you can either walk with them to the grave, or you can stop and say, I'll be here if you decide to come back. You can't reach inside their head and flip a switch. You can't pander to anything. We don't listen to anything. We don't have any empathy. We don't care that you love us. We don't care. We care about drinking, and that's it.
absolutely.
It's a sad way to look at another human being, but that's the disease. That's how powerful it is, and there are no other options for people other than to, if you'll listen to me, and if I take you someplace again, will you? Luckily, I did.
Yes. Well, that's the most important thing, because there's so many horror stories out there, especially alcoholism. I think more people die from alcohol poisoning than well, except for nowadays the opioid epidemic has probably trumped all that. But the fact that you get to that incomprehensible demoralization, there's that moment where you just can't go on any further on your own recognizance.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you have to do, somebody says something and there's just that moment where you're like, okay, because it's either that or I'm going to die. And I don't want to drink anymore, but I don't know how to get sober, and I'm living in this hell, right? So what's the point?
Yeah.
So then you found your way into the sober living, but at this point you've been drinking for so long that you must have been going through DTs, going through withdrawals. Your body must have just been ready to shut down at any moment without the alcohol. So what were those first few months like, and what did you do for detox?
Well, before I entered the last rehab, they took me to the hospital, and I was hallucinating in the hospital. I had no idea. I'd heard about hallucinations, but unless you experience them, they're not probably what you think. It's actually very real to you. And when it's explained that by a nurse or a doctor that you're not seeing that and you're not hearing that, it could be scary, but maybe it's because, you're so delirious, but you just kind of accept, at least I did, like, really? That's not happening? That guy over there is not trying to kill the other guy in the bed. That man that I just pointed out to you didn't come punch me in the head. That's us. And it was as real as could be to me. So the deliriums and all that, I was able to be in a hospital. And but still, by the time I had gotten back to the rehab, they wouldn't accept me first. And when I came back the second time, I was in horrible shape. I mean, I could barely walk. Sometimes other people at the rehab would help me up and down the stairs, and they would, they could see the difference in me. And the irony of that is, when I left and then went to the rehab, I just got to share one story. One of the guys at my sober living home had gone out, and I found him. I had to take him to rehab because he was in such bad shape. When I got back to that same rehab, when I went in to check him in, the woman standing across from me was staring at me with her eyes really big, and she walked up to me and she said, "Is your name Robert Apple?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh my God." She said, "I can't believe the change in you." She was there when my daughter dropped me off, and she said I was mostly dead inside. It was just like a zombie. So I was just shocked at that she, so I didn't feel like I'd changed that much. But
the thing is, we don't see it. It's the other people that see it. You know, for us, we're struggling. We're struggling to make it one day at a time. But then this time passes and, somebody sees you and it's like, whoa, but that's a wonderful feeling. It's a wonderful feeling to have.
Oh, I felt, I had such a smile on my face. She said, "God, you actually have a personality." And I was just like shocked, how badly you can actually get and you think you're sort of normal and you're not. It was so bizarre to actually take, I'd been out of there about a year and a half to go revisit there and be bringing someone to help, for help at that same rehab, that last one I was at. That was really surrealistic to go through that whole process and remember it all, a year and a half ago.
when you kind of go back in time a little bit, it's just so impossible to believe.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I thank God every day, of course, and I sit on my bed and and I'll have flashbacks sometimes, and I cannot believe how beautiful life is right now. And at one point in time, I had those 2 bottles, and I was just hoping that one of them would finish me off.
And so when did a lot of the hallucinations and the delirium tremors and all that stuff start to kind of subside?
Well, you're only in rehab for 28 days, so I was still shaking. I really couldn't write very well. So when I first got to the rehab, I was still in kind of rough shape, and oh my God, the worst part, I think, of all of this is the insomnia. I just could not sleep. So when I got to the rehab, I was one of the guys that would sit up on the couch all night watching TV, very low, just because I just couldn't sleep. So I would say about 2 months in, I started to feel much better. And about 4 months, most of my insomnia was gone. And that's just something you have to go through. There's not much you can do for it. Your body just has to get well.
Right. So I'm assuming first you were in rehab before you went into the
sober living home, yes.
Okay. And so how long were you in rehab?
28 days.
Okay. So then from the 28-day rehab, then you went into the sober living, and then you were there for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Now, you're saying that it was the best thing that you ever did, but, was there any kind of like interesting stories that, it couldn't always be perfect. What I mean?
Yeah, no.
So what kind of, was there any kind of funny stories, living together with a bunch of sober people? Because, you got people that got less time than others, and some people that have a little bit better foundation than others. Anything like that?
Oh yeah, there's always lots of characters in there, and as time goes by and you get more comfortable with each other, you can share so many stories. I remember I just wrote a blog about this because it popped into my head. The stories that of course, there's lots of humorous incidences that happen just normally with a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of addicts and drunks in a house. But I remember we were watching the Super Bowl, and we were all laughing at it because we're saying, you know what? We'll actually remember this tomorrow. We'll actually know everything about the game. As opposed to, passing out somewhere or catching a DUI and driving home or whatever, or having to call in sick the next day and some lame excuse. And one of the guys that we were all sharing stories about how we used to call in sick from work and all those things. And this one guy popped up. I'll never forget this. And he said, yeah, I remember, after the Super Bowl, of course, I was still drunk. And so I called my boss and told him that, hey, I'm in jail because I got pulled over for drunk driving, so I won't be able to make it in today. And he hung up the phone, and then he stopped and said to himself, when the hell did I say that? That didn't happen. Of all the excuses I could have come up with, I said that to my boss. It was so, and if you knew the guy, it's so much his personality too. To say something like that, like not be clever, just like say something that is going to be a surefire, well, I can't make it because I'm in jail kind of thing. And because he was still half drunk, he just didn't think it through. He just grabbed the phone and did it, Of course, there's pranks that go on in the house. There's always pranks, and there's a lot of joking, and there's, lots of. I think the thing that I miss the most is all the funny stories. They're only funny to us because we live through them and we understand them. If you tell them in another crowd, people are just aghast, like that's not funny. That's really inappropriate. But there, and it was cathartic to share those and it made us think, how silly we were and how ridiculous our behaviors were and how abhorrent they were, how not that behavior is not, you just don't want to go revisit that in your life.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. I mean, it's like when you go into a meeting, right? And if a normie's there, And people are sharing their stories just like these, and everyone in the room's cracking up laughing.
Yeah.
And and they're like, wow, okay, that's interesting, right? Because they can't believe sometimes that people are laughing at the absolute devastation of somebody else's life. But the reality is that we all get it. We understand it's not funny what happened, but it's a funny anecdote after the fact. Sharing our story with others for the purpose of helping others.
Yes.
And it just so happens to be entertaining because a lot of times it's pretty funny stuff.
Oh, man, I laughed. We all laughed so much around that house because there were so many bizarre stories. Well, I'll tell you one that, and of course I tell others this. It's sort of a sad story, but I was there about, 3 weeks, and I had insomnia, so I was sitting up watching TV all by myself. And one of the new clients that we had in came walking through the front door, and it scared the hell out of me because I'm sitting there watching TV. It's like 1:30 in the morning, and all of a sudden I hear the front door open, and it's like quiet, and someone's kind of creeping in. And so I was kind of frozen in fear, really. It's like, who's not coming in normally? Who's like tiptoeing and creeping in? And the door shuts really slowly, and I see this figure come into the front living room, and I recognize the face because he's a new guy, but I'm like, something's not right, and I'm looking at him, and I realize he's wearing a hospital gown.
What?
And I'm like, yeah, and I'm thinking, what is going? And he comes over and sits down next to me on the couch, and he smells like alcohol. And I'm like, oh my God. And I said, I got to go get the house manager. And he sits down. He went off the reservation, went to some party or something, as the story goes, got into some sort of fight, wound up in the hospital, broke out of the hospital in that gown, took a cab and came back to the house and thought he could walk back in. Typical behavior of an alcoholic.
Oh man, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I used to share that story with everybody, and everybody would laugh, and I'd say, that's what we look like to others, and someone who's not serious about being sober, that's what this looks like, And I was just. I could not believe my eyes. I really couldn't.
Oh man!
And he gave me one of those, as he sat down next to me, like I'm not going to do anything or not even ask him why he's in a. He doesn't even have shoes on. All he's got is a literally just the robe, that gown they give you. And he purses his lips and he puts his finger up and he goes, "Shh, don't tell anybody."
It's like a scene out of a movie. Oh man, that's good.
Unfortunately for him, I did tell somebody.
Makes for a great story.
Yeah, it does. I suppose you probably want to hear some others that maybe aren't so great. There, like anything else, in a sober living home, you're going to have all kinds of things that are going to happen there, and you're going to hear a lot of things that are uncomfortable, especially if you're the house manager. And so there's times where being a house manager is not the easiest job in the world. And the protocol for, most sober living homes is if you are tested and you get caught coming up dirty, you've got to leave. So one night it was raining and it was cold, and we didn't get a chance to test everybody. It takes a while to test everybody in the house on a testing. You call a random testing and you test everyone. They have to stay in the house, and sometimes get people to pee on command is not going to happen. So it takes a couple hours. So one of the young girls that came up dirty, I was surprised. Everybody was clean except for this person, and I'm supposed to tell her to leave, and she's from Sacramento. So there was nobody to call. There was no way to get in touch with anybody. She had no money. I didn't know what to do. The protocol was to make them call somebody. If they can't, they're going to have to just get out of the house because it's unsafe to have you there. But you can't be using. You can't come up dirty.
Right.
And so I looked over the landscape and I said to myself, you know what? It's late at night. I'm going to go ahead and make a bed in the garage. on the sofa in there, and I'm just going to let her, stay there, and we'll sort this out in the morning. And so there's times like that where it's difficult, and it's also difficult to have a kid. I'm going to tell you this. This was heartbreaking to have two things. To have a kid that I caught, he came up dirty, and it was the second time, so he's got to go. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Right.
And to walk him out to the curb, and I said, "You call your parents?" "No." "You call me?" "I don't need anybody. It's fine. I don't want to call my parents. I don't want anything. I just want to leave." And I said, and I looked at him. I said, "Kevin, where are you going? There's no place to go. What are your plans? You have a home here, and your parents are paying rent. Why not stay here and get sober?" And he just looked at me in the eye, and he said, "I'm not ready." And he said, "And I'm not afraid to be homeless." And he took whatever belongings he had on his back, and he just took off walking.
Oh, man. And
it just kills you. It breaks your heart, because you're trying to manage the house, and you're trying to help everyone. And the hardest thing, is that in the end, you can't help everyone, and you can't save everyone. And it kills you. It takes a piece of you, to do that job. You can only do it so long, I think. And after a while, it just takes too much out of you to see that over and over, enough times, But that's the nature of the job. That's the nature of the disease. That's the nature of everything. And all the people that did make it, and that I was able to help, and I was able to mentor, and I was able to get them going in life, made all the difference in the world. It made the balance. And spending, being an older gentleman that had gone through life, had a marriage, had a job, had a career, I was sort of in a position where I could help young people, like, don't worry, you can get back on track. It's a long road. Life is a long road. Just get started. Here's a plan. Let me help you. Where are you at in life? What do you need to do? What's your credit like? Even if you stay here a year and a half, if we don't work on your credit and at least get it up to like 650, you couldn't even afford to get an apartment. No one's going to let you do anything. Just simple things. And like I would tell them, if you get a job, make sure you move up one rung on the ladder. I don't care if you just go to work at McDonald's, build a resume, and you go to the next job and move up one spot. And eventually, maybe you can find yourself in a management position where you manage people. I had a chance to mentor young people, and that was a huge thing for me, to bring that experience to them. Yeah, that was the beauty part of that job. It really was.
Beautiful, powerful stories here, Robert. Man, chilling, man. Again, you paint a beautiful picture of a horrible situation. That sadness of letting somebody go because you've got no choice, and they're so wrapped up in the disease that there's absolutely nothing you can do. Absolutely nothing you can do. Just give them the dignity of finding their own bottom. That's basically what you're faced to do. So.
Yeah, and I would always give everybody a big hug when they left, regardless of the circumstances. Even if I had to kick them out, I gave them a big hug and held it for a while, and I wished them well, and I said, there's always a door open here too.
That's beautiful. I'm sure that is something that any one of us would do, because you get so attached. You get so attached, and it's a beautiful thing to feel again. It's a beautiful thing to feel again, and to be able to reach out. Give somebody a hug and say, I'm here for you, no matter what.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I would always go back to my room and thank God. I'd say, thank you so much for saving me. Thank you so much for coming into my life and giving me some guidance so that I can help others. I'd always remember that, where it all came from.
Absolutely. All right, Robert. Well, we're going to start to close up now.
Okay.
And the way we do that is for the newcomer. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions about your early recovery. Yeah. And I want you to respond with inspiring and insightful answers you can share with our newcomers. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's do this. Number 1, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
My ego. I didn't want to accept that I was an addict or an alcoholic. I did not want to accept that.
Yeah, many of us don't. Denial.
Just total denial.
Okay, so number 2, at what point did you have a spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed the hope that you could recover?
That was my second week in rehab third week in rehab, when I was feeling so downtrodden. But I worked really hard in the rehab. I participated in all the classes and everything. And they came around, and I didn't even know if I was going to make it when I got out. I just didn't have much hope. And everyone in the group, there was about 40 people at that rehab. No, 60 people at that rehab at that time. It was a very large one. And they wanted to vote me in to be the president for the term. And so they have like the camp president, and you get all these duties and everything. And I was so inspired that and I thought God had, orchestrated that somehow to make me feel like I should go on, like I should be inspired again. I should try and live again.
Absolutely. And number 3, do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to a newcomer that you read in early recovery?
I do. And it's a really obscure, and it's written by Christine Campbell, and it's called With Vigilance, A Woman in Long-Term Sobriety. And it's not, I think you have to order it online. I think it's electronic only, and it was self-published. And the reason, so it's Christine Campbell, and you can look that up online if you're interested. The reason I like this book of all the books I read is it was a journey that starts, it's almost like, first of all, it's just written by, not edited. This woman wrote the whole book herself. So it's not, and it starts from a young age when she started in the family dynamic. You see how the cauldron of an addict or an alcoholic can be born, and through her process and all through her life. And she wound up, and it's an interesting story too. She ended up marrying a musician that was in an extremely famous band, and in her life chronicled all the way to the end. She became, she worked in nursing homes, and how she got her sobriety. But the thing about that book that I liked the most was it was so real. It's so raw. And you can see how an addict and an alcoholic can be developed from a family unit that was dysfunctional. And then how that addict works within their, say, 20s and into their 30s. And then when they become sober and into their 40s, and now she's like, 60 years old, how all that developed. And I just found it was a fascinating book because it had nobody's hands on it. She didn't hand it over to an editor, anything. It was all like a handwritten memoir. And it's fascinating. I loved it.
Great suggestion. That's the first time someone has recommended that book. It'll be on the show notes, folks. And I'll find the link on Amazon. I'm sure they sell it on Amazon.
Yes. Yeah, they do.
Okay. So number 4, what is the best suggestion you have ever received?
Oh, I can tell you that for sure. And it's 2 words: let go. And I asked him, I said, what do you mean by that? And this, of course, was my sponsor. And he said, you need to let go. He said, you need to let go of all the past. He said, we can't get through. You're blocking everything because you're letting the past creep up on you again. You're letting everything mount up on your shoulders. He said, you're not absorbing what's being told in meetings. He says, I can tell. He says, you need to let go more. And it wasn't until I listened to that and just decided not to worry so much about what everybody thinks of me and about what my family thinks and my friends and all the damage I've done. Concentrate on getting better. Let go.
I love it, man. That's beautiful. Beautifully said. Let go. I've had to do that a lot lately. Just let go. Ask God to allow me to, the serenity prayer, right?
Yep.
And just, there's certain things that are out of my control, and I got to let those go, right?
Absolutely.
It's so liberating when you can.
Yeah. Yeah, he can see it.
Yep, absolutely. And so finally, number 5, if you could give a newcomer only one suggestion, what would it be?
I would say, just for me and what I've seen others, listen. If I'm going to give one word to you, when you go to a meeting, listen. When you get a sponsor, listen. If you go to rehab and they have all these suggestions, listen. Listen, not just listen to hear the words or not listen so you could remember them or whatever. Listen to what's being said. If you do that, you don't have to go to 3 rehabs like I did. You could go to 1 if you just pay attention and listen. And that's where I see people going wrong. Yeah, we can tell humans to pay attention and listen, but listening means actually let it absorb into you and think of how you can act on that, not just listen so you could regurgitate it back to somebody.
Absolutely. There's a difference between hearing and listening.
Yes. Yep.
I got it. I know.
Yeah. And that's why I was the first 2 rehabs. Okay, I know everything that they're going to tell me. Yeah, but I wasn't listening with and absorbing it. I was just listening. It's 2 different things. Listen to the point where you can actually not just say it back, but you can actually act on it. And when they tell you something, then you can employ that into your life.
Absolutely. Great suggestions, Robert. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. Can I mention something?
Please.
Okay. I'm building a website for all the sober living homes to be involved in. And my goal here is so that people can find when you come out of rehab, you can find a sober living home that's available. And because it's so important, if you don't go to a sober living home right after rehab, chances are you won't go. And so I built an online website that all the sober living homes can be involved in. And in real time, they can update their room availability, just like say apartments.com or something. If you're looking for a sober living home, you can find a room in the area that you want, and you can get placed in it right away. And it's called findingsoberhomes.com.
And so it's already live?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. That will also be posted on the show notes. Is there any other way that you can suggest our listeners reach out to you?
Oh, absolutely. You can reach me at my website, soberapple.com, and you can email me. You can. I've got my phone number posted on there, and I get people calling me, so I have no problem. If you have any questions, anything about sober homes, rehabs, staying sober, I don't care what it is regarding recovery. If you have a question, feel free to call me, especially parents. And I get parents calling me.
Beautiful. I love it. All right. Well, folks, we have now reached the end of our show. Thanks again, Robert, for joining us today, man.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Absolutely.
Beautiful. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on the SHAIR Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.theshairpodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then. The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a whole. And though we discuss 12-Step recovery,